Welcome back to a fresh, brand new episode of the Deconversionists. It has been a full week or two since we've done an episode, but here we are, as promised. We are not going away. So today, myself and Ellen, the man hosting this, right to your, I don't know which side you're on, but somewhere around here.
That side.
Okay. We've got a guest today. We have Samuel Spoonhour, the Christian philosopher, coming over from his channel. Samuel, if you want to go ahead and tell us what your channel is called.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have multiple channels. I have the Gospel Call, which is primarily evangelistic. At least that's the goal now. And then I have Christian philosophy. I'm not actually a philosopher in terms of a proper scholar. I'm still a layman. But I do love philosophy and I love sharing my ideas. And it's mostly centered around really just things that I believe are important in today's age, and just also bringing ideas out that usually people will disagree. That's one of the big things. Is my first video was on something that a lot of Christians would disagree on me with, because it just leads to certain ideas that a lot of Christians don't like. But so it's controversial, but in a good way, I think.
Yeah, there is nothing wrong with controversy, because I mean, within Christianity itself, there's been countless controversies over theology and what have you. Hit the sky's the limit on the list.
Yeah.
So today, I guess we're going to talk a little bit about skepticism, and we're really curious on hearing your perspective on that, because I have watched your most recent videos, and you have talked about how you don't hold to or affirm something called scientific skepticism, and I'm really curious about like what exactly that means to you, and why exactly you don't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to just thank Mr. Allen for having me on, and you too, Mr. Elliott. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem.
It's an honor to be here. Don't get invited to these things much, so. But
well,
yeah,
we're always looking for Christian guests to have on, and not necessarily put them under the hot seat or under the heat lamps, but just to have a conversation.
Yeah, awesome.
Because both sides, I think, suffer from this. You'll have atheists and ex-Christians with their YouTube channels, and they'll have on guests of the same flavor, of the same persuasion as they are. And then you'll have the Christian apologetics community that'll do the same thing. And it's very seldom where they really try to come together and have a conversation about what they believe and why, or what they don't believe and why. And that's what really matters, is right where that tension meets, because that's where we find common ground, and that's where we solve problems and make progress, if there's progress to be found. So thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And I absolutely believe in that progress. I know there's an extent where we can only go so far, but I know that, just having human relations, and as a Christian, I believe that's a good thing to have. Whether, you'll probably never convert, but I'm perfectly fine with being your friend until the very end. So, so I think skepticism has always been intriguing for me, because just in my life, I have always been someone who questions pretty much everything. And sometimes it's a bad thing, because it also includes not in an anti-authority way, but sometimes my father and my mother's authority when I was younger anyways. Just like genuine questioning. I was actually probably the best kid. I'm just going to throw that out there. My brothers and sisters might agree with me on that. I don't know. But I behaved my parents super well, but I just, I would always ask myself, why do I have to obey my parents? Why should I listen to them? I would even ask my mom oftentimes, like, why is it I wouldn't say it like this, but I would pose the question, why do I actually obey you? Like, why do I listen? Why do I have to listen to you? And again, not like anti-authority, because I wanted to, but because I believed it was right, but I still wanted to continue to understand further. I know most kids in general, when they're young, they don't know that much. They usually question, but it's because they don't know things. It wasn't that I didn't know. It's that I wanted to understand further. I wanted to constantly take those ideas, break them down, and then understand them from there. And I've always been interested in technology in this way, where I'll take something apart and try to understand it. I love computers. And this, I'm sorry, this is a long story, but this is really just context here to just how I think. And I love tearing them apart. I'm always curious exactly how, I was curious for a very long time. How does a computer actually work? What is actually telling those electrons to go through the circuit board, through the resistors, beyond the capacitors and all that? Once I finally learned it, I was so dissatisfied because they didn't go into the deep philosophy of it. I was like, tell me more. And so I think with then growing up in a pastor's home where there's this constant study. I mean, I've been in Bible studies on Bible studies on Bible studies. And I think with that, I've always tried to question my own beliefs and my own philosophy and just my entire worldview. Exactly why do I do the things that I do? I wouldn't say on a necessarily a day-to-day basis, but I would say consistently. I did it more when I was younger. I do it less now. But it's just because, again, there's only so many, like with certain topics, there's only so much you can know, especially as a human. But skepticism in that sense then interests me because it's all about really finding the answers. At least scientific skepticism is all about finding the answer through proper science, understanding I guess the scientific model, but you hypothesize and then you test and then you essentially have to try to falsify those ideas. And that isn't necessarily that didn't come from skeptics, but scientific skeptics will use it a lot. And it's known in the materialistic realm of science today that, I mean, that's just how you understand things. That is how you continue to grow in knowledge, is because we assume that we as humans are limited and fallible. We're mortals. And so we need to not just assume something is true. We need to actually try to falsify it. And then from there, if you get, if you have essentially 100 ways or 100 tests, but then only one of them is correct, you get 99 no's and only one yes. And I mean, just look at Thomas Edison, the one who made the light bulb. Took him 1,000 tries, and he got it on the 1,000 first try. And that's science. And I have always had this large appreciation for that, but I don't want to go so far as to say, and this just from reading, the book, I started it. I don't know exactly everything because I've only barely started reading it. I don't know exactly where Dr. Novella stands and the others completely. But from what I understand of skepticism, there's no ultimate truth. And in a sense, there's no, you can say that things are true and you can test up to probably about 99.9% sure. Or he said certitude. And so
let's slow it down a little bit here.
Sorry. That was a lot.
Well, I want to be a good interviewer and kind of keep the pacing going here.
Of course.
So let's try something interesting.
Okay.
Probably the three of us have a slightly different definition of skepticism. So I'm wondering if what we can do is each of us give like a one sentence answer of our definition of what we think skepticism means to us. Like if you're to define skepticism in like one sentence, how would you do that?
Yeah, I think that's good. Probably you would probably consistently doubt with the cause or the intent of finding truth. So that's how I would define it.
Okay. And how about you, Ellen?
How to define it? I'm pretty close to what Samuel would say. That definition was pretty good. But definitely utilizing the falsifiability of something is an important key element. But yeah, speaking to seeking justified true belief through um, demonstrating evidence that can be falsified or not falsified or not no, it has to be falsified. Yeah, you caught me off guard with that. That's tough to nail a definition. Like, you kind of know what skepticism is, but an actual definition of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
those elements is how I would do it. And of course, you probably have a definition straight out the gate.
Well,
So
yeah, it's kind of a hard one to nail down without actually like Googling it or looking it up in a dictionary. But I guess I would try to boil it down as much as I could to one sentence would be it's using or finding the correct process to come to what is true. Um, People like to, you know, say skepticism is they kind of equate it too much with cynicism, like refusing to believe anything. But I don't think skepticism is as much about belief as it is the process. Like you have a claim that somebody says, "Hey, this is true." They present a hypothesis, and then skepticism would be, "Okay, how do we know that? Like, what process can we go through to determine whether that's true or whether that's false?"
Mm.
And I think it's oftentimes extremely difficult or possibly impossible to prove something to be true. Um, I think in the scientific realm, you have to try to prove it false. And if you continuously are unable to do that, it becomes like a theory or a model that you're going to trust until new information comes that falsifies it.
right. So when you
So,
said correct model or correct method, I would say that might be the word observable would be a good element to add there. If it's not observable, then how can you possibly test it?
or just explaining the process of how you came to a conclusion, maybe. It's a tough one. So Samuel, when you say scientific skepticism, are you differentiating that between regular skepticism? Like, is there a difference, or is skepticism like universal, whether it's scientific or not, or how do you differentiate that?
Yeah, I would say that, in my opinion, skepticism is the same across the board, whether just philosophical or scientific, because your philosophy will drive your science. It'll drive how you do science. It's skepticism isn't necessarily a worldview, but it certainly is an ideology, if you know what I mean. And so, it's something that you could have almost in anything. It doesn't necessarily need to be an atheist is a skeptic, right?
So can I
So,
suggest, maybe now that we've talked it through a little bit more, the definition of skepticism um, is questioning everything from afar.
hmm. That's the thing, is that questioning though has to have the intent of, because you run into cynicism, is that it's just you don't really want to believe anything. And I know skeptics like that. You don't really want to hold to any idea because
Well,
they
you're
just
correct.
say, I'm not sure. And like,
No, you're correct. There are
when,
skeptics that are like that, but
yeah,
that's not the same as being a skeptic.
yeah, exactly.
Not wanting to believe something is a totally different category. So it'd be the same as saying
Yeah,
so, all Christians are Calvinists because some are.
yeah,
That's not the same. You can't equate the two. So they are different definitions. So some people, yes, they don't want to believe anything. Okay, fine. You may have run into people like that, but being a skeptic, simply, if you just take it at its sheer, and here we can't give a specific definition, but the sheer definition that I'm sure if we looked it up, we would all be like,
mhm,
oh yeah, there it is. It's when you can observe something from afar and you question it and you determine whether or not it's got validity to whatever is being argued for. Um,
sure.
so if it does, then I'm more inclined as a skeptic to embrace it because I see something to it that can be verified. It can be demonstrated to actually occur, so to speak. Um, Whereas when I don't see evidence for something, I see no need to embrace it, and therefore, until I draw a conclusion that actually has evidence for it, I'm just going to say I don't know. So to say every skeptic that says I don't know is just being obtuse and not willing to accept things, I don't think that's necessarily a fair statement.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And
So, sorry, Sam, I didn't want to interrupt.
It's
Just
okay.
wanted to give you a question to work with before you go on. So, I would say myself and Ellen were Christians because we were not skeptical of the beliefs that we were presented with, and we just believed them.
Hmm.
And then when we applied skepticism to our Christian beliefs, we both used the process, probably slightly different process, but after applying skepticism to our beliefs, we lost the belief, abandoned it as false because we falsified it through methods. So do you apply some kind of skeptical method to your beliefs where you are using that method, you're unable to falsify Christianity, and that's why you're a Christian? Or have you used a method where you have proven your beliefs to be true, and that's why you still hold them?
No, I would see. That's interesting because I wouldn't say I have one, written down necessarily. It's more or less just what I believe, at least from what I've learned um, from science and from listening to philosophers and really just the philosophy that I've learned is that you um, you examine and then you hypothesize, and really you use deductive reasoning to come to a proper conclusion. That's just a basic thing for philosophy. And then you compare and contrast, and you test it, you stand it up to things that ultimately are opponents. I would say just you really just would do that. At least I just do that with my own ideas, my own thoughts. And I've really just, I mean, I'm a Christian, so I believe that I've come to the conclusion that is true, of course. But like, for
Yeah, I'm just
instance,
curious if you've used some kind of process to test your beliefs or to try to falsify them. Have you applied skepticism to your Christian beliefs?
yeah, I believe that I have. And I say that with certainty. But I would say, um, see, this is the thing, is that I haven't actually written it down, so I have to think about it.
Well, it's
um,
probably good to think about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, like, for instance, I would say, one of the things I think about a lot is God's existence. Um, I just will ask myself the question, how do I know that God exists? And sometimes I'll go into deep thought, sometimes more days than others. But I'll actually consider first of all, the science that I know, possibly even do more research into like, for instance, the beginning of the universe. I'm a big proponent of the Big Bang, and just seeing if there's actually good evidence for that's actually true, looking at other things. And most of the time I can remember these things and I'm able to just do this in my mind. I actually can, and weigh, is this actually proper reasoning? Are there other reasons to believe that there wasn't a beginning to the universe? Or is it possible that there are multiverses out there that, say, have a different cause that's natural or material? Can I actually know for sure that if those exist, that there's still that God ultimately is still the cause? And of course, that doesn't mean Christianity is true. Just because there's, some supernatural being, that doesn't point to Yahweh. But it's a start. And so
Right.
I do stuff like that, is that I take the knowledge and information that I've taken in, and whenever I listen to any others, like scientists or philosophers, or even you guys, for instance, I want to, like, learn from you guys about what you think skepticism is, and I want to understand your standpoint. I'll take that in as information, try to remember it, and then weigh it against my own thoughts and see exactly, does my logic actually stand up against that? So it's honestly like personal philosophy and personal skepticism. I almost wish I would have more conversations and possibly even more debates to have a more robust system. But
well, we can definitely do that. I think all three of us, because when you talk about first cause and the Big Bang, I think that's sort of a scientific claim. It comes a lot later. I think all three of us started with the Bible. So when I would apply skepticism to my Christian beliefs, I would apply skepticism to the Bible. And one of the principles of skepticism is falsifiability. So outside of anything, like a first cause or a Big Bang, like have you applied any skeptical methods to the scriptures itself? Why do you, or what do you think it would take to falsify the scripture?
Yeah, I would say the interesting thing about the Bible is that I have come to the conclusion that is true based on lots of reasons. It's not just one. It would probably be the same with God's existence, but I would say with the Bible specifically, there's more to it. When I was probably younger than 20, I would say, I believe that it was true based on more of what I examined in the world, and I thought that its worldview, the Christian worldview, actually fit the world the best, and that the say, for instance, the teaching of Jesus, and I know this isn't evidence, but I'm just, anyways, what am I thinking? I mean, I know it's evidence, but it's not proof. But like, for instance, Jesus's teachings, I have seen those work essentially, that the teachings of Jesus actually help people and have done good for society. Like one of the biggest things that I have always believed, and I learned this early on, is that society has, especially Western civilization, has been heavily influenced by the Judeo-Christian worldview and has given us so many of the freedoms that we have today. Like, for instance, freedom of speech and rights. I mean, you could talk to almost any historian and they would agree with that. But I didn't get that from a historian necessarily. I got that from just learning high school history.
Did you get that from the Bible? You say Christianity or the Christian worldview has given us these things like rights and freedom of speech, etc.
Yes.
But where do you pull that out of the Bible, though? Can you get that out of the source material, or is that just the Christian culture has given us that?
Yeah, I would say it's a mixture. It's people that I respect, but it's also my own reading. I have read the Bible a lot. And I would say, for instance, the biggest thing for rights is really just that, and I don't think you necessarily even need the Bible for this. I think the Bible says it, but you don't need it. It's just that a creator who is who ultimately loves us, created us with purpose, and gave us value, ultimately put value onto us. And the Bible shows it and also tells it in different ways. Like, for instance, Jesus coming to die for us, and he does that for every single human being. He puts value from there then on every single human being. He also created us in his likeness, in that we're able to think and to do what we wish. And we're separate from animals. Like, that's one big thing in Genesis chapter 2, is that human beings are separate from God, certainly. They're not divine, but they're also separate from the rest of the creation. It's like there's this distinctness that the writer is trying to show. And of course, that's an ideology. The Bible is very opinionated at times, and you have to agree with that. But I believe that I will look back at that and think that because I believe that God exists, and I believe that this in fact is the God of the Bible, then ultimately he has placed this value onto me. So you kind of get what I'm saying? Or like,
it sounds like you've drawn an implication from something that's not explicit. So, like, I can't get rights from the Bible if I just read the Bible.
Sure. Yeah.
You're implying that humans have value because God would want to save us, through Jesus, but it doesn't actually say that. Like I can't find the Bill of Rights in the Bible. I can't find freedom of
Right.
speech in there. I can't find like anything that we hold dear in Western civilization as human rights. I can't pull that from Scripture anywhere. Like that's something that humans have come up with. That's something Christians have come up with. It's extra biblical.
Yeah, I would say in a sense, it's almost like I don't know if you've ever read the Church Fathers, but I mean, oh my goodness, the Church Fathers, so many documents of very,
Yet
very
they're
wise
they're
men
not
and
canon.
philosophers.
The
No,
problem is
I
they're not
agree.
canon.
No, I agree, but they'll take the canon and reason from there and try to interpret it. I would say that, for instance, Jesus said to, I mean, everyone knows this, to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, you ask, why in the world should I do that? You ask just that simple question. And basic deductive reasoning just comes to the simple answer that God has placed value on us and we're all equal ultimately before God, because he has essentially given us that value. It's not like an arbitrary thing. It's not just human design, but actually there's this intent behind it. And so then you can say from there that, well, then everyone should have the opportunity to speak freely and to have freedom of religion. At least that's where I would get those ideas from. So I agree, the Bill of Rights is absolutely extra biblical. Even just freedom from slavery, for instance. There were Christians who thought that slavery was okay and some who thought that it was not okay. In my opinion, the Bible is I wouldn't say explicit, but it's very implicit that you having a slave in the sense that you're not treating that person as a human being created in the image of God with the same value as you, then that's wrong, right? That's evil from that idea. So it's I mean, literally, it's literally extra biblical. So it's not, you can't 100% prove that, for instance, the Bill of Rights or the even the Constitution that we have is actually the exact right thing. And I don't believe that it is. I disagree with some of the things in the Constitution and Bill of Rights, but that's my opinion. So if you get what I mean.
And you got that slavery was wrong from the Bible?
Yes. Yeah. Like,
Wow.
not indentured servitude, but slavery in the sense that you're treating your fellow human not as a human. So in other words, if you get what I mean.
How do you define indentured servitude?
Well, indentured servitude would be just someone who owes you money, and this is something that was done in ancient cultures, is that if you owed someone money, you would essentially have a contract to work for that person for so many years to pay off your debts. Not really something we see today. You see it in some third world countries, but just not really in first world countries. We just have credit, and sometimes we are in lots and lots of debt.
And you would define that as slavery?
Yeah, that's the thing. I wouldn't indentured servitude. I wouldn't personally call it like modern slavery, because modern slavery is a lot different.
No, I'm not talking about, well, I mean, I'm not so sure that's the case. If you look at places in the Old Testament, particularly in Exodus, where God commands how to get your slaves, how to treat them, how to make sure, and a lot of times, like especially with women, how to forcibly have sex with them to make sure that you like them, and if you don't, then you sell them or get rid of them. And there's a lot of places that we can go to that actually have not just this idea of paying off a debt, but like literally taking people from other nations and making them your slaves for life. You don't get to work it off. They're just your slaves for life. And also how you pass them on to your children forever and ever. Like they are property. Like you can't escape the fact that God actually condoned and commanded slavery, like literal slavery, like we had in America, and probably worse.
Yeah, well, and he does actually, God does say that they are property. It doesn't mean though that they don't have still value from God. In fact, he very
But
much tells
that-
them to treat
that doesn't
them
matter.
with
God may
love
say-
and respect and to do good to them. But the culture back then is very, very, very different from what we have today. Back then, this was a common thing in war.
Hey, Samuel, hang on a second. Whoa. So you're telling me when God tells them how to beat their slaves, as long as they don't die within 3 days, that's them. He's showing them how to have love towards their slaves.
No, he doesn't say to beat them. He says if you do, and you don't hurt them, that
They don't die within
that's-
3 days, and that's a legitimate way to beat them. That's a condoning of
no, it's not. It's not an acceptance as much as it is. It's more like. See, I want to say protection, but again, the culture back then is very different.
What difference does the culture make? God's condoning it.
It makes a very big
That's what I'm
difference.
saying, that God is,
There's a lot.
is bound by the culture he's in. He has to allow it because that culture was like that. So, well, I don't have a choice. I got to teach my people how to have slaves too.
No, not at all. In fact, the reason I say culture, for instance, the first of the 10 Commandments has to do with, or actually it's the second one. It has to do with fashioning gods, fashioning something in earth or in heaven and worshiping that. It's not something we do in America. So that doesn't really apply. Then again, I guess there are some people who do actually do that. But that is more culturally specific. I would say that that's with a lot of the commandments. You have to understand the culture and understand even the previous ideas that God gives. Like literally in Deuteronomy, he says to treat everyone as if you would treat yourself. Like the golden rule is the same.
Slaves from these nations that you conquer and make your property.
Let's try something to simplify it a little bit.
Sure.
Samuel, would you agree that in ancient times there was slavery that would have mirrored the type of slavery that we used to have in America?
Yeah, I would say there was actually quite a lot of it.
Like real slavery, like the type of slavery when the Egyptians had enslaved the Hebrews. Like real slavery.
Yeah, I don't think anyone went to the degree of the Egyptians, but
so
again, I could be wrong.
If that type of slavery did exist, and would you differentiate between the Hebrew, Deuteronomy, Exodus era when there was indentured servitude where a Hebrew owed another Hebrew money and then he would become his servant for a time before he paid that off, versus a slavery outlined in the Bible when God says, you shall buy your slaves from the heathens around you. Like those are two different systems. One would be for the Hebrews to pay off a debt, another would be for buying actual slaves. This is where the problem arises, that there's a different system there where the Hebrews are keeping actual slaves at the same time that they're keeping each other as indentured servants to pay off a debt. So traditional real slavery existed in ancient Israel. Do you agree with that?
See, that's the thing, is that God didn't essentially intend it to be like, say, why can't I think of the word? Torturous or inhumane. I mean, we think just any degree of slavery is inhumane. But I would say that indentured servitude isn't a bad idea. But I would say that there are a lot of people on the far right who would completely disagree with me.
But you'd agree there's two different systems at play in the Hebrew culture. One is for slaves, one is for indentured servitude, right?
I'd say that what God is specifically commanding is they're more like dynamic laws, not dynamic. See, that's the thing, is that God ultimately knows what they're going to do. And there's instances of God even making a law where he says, don't take any women from the nations that you will attack because they'll ultimately convert you. Right. But then right after that, he gives a law about if in case you do this, if in case you take wives from these people, then they need to go through this process of converting to Judaism, which is a tedious process, but it's because he knows they're going to do it anyways, even though he directly commands them, do not take wives, but yet they still do it. So it's the same with...
From Leviticus 25, because I'm just curious if you would define this as indentured servitude or slavery. This is verses 44 to 46. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life. Does that sound like indentured servitude or slavery?
I would say it's honestly neither. I would say there's a third one, and it would be probably a war slave. But God doesn't say treat them inhumanely. So he doesn't ultimately...
So you're saying if you don't treat a slave inhumanely, it's okay to own a slave?
Well, I would say it's wrong to treat a slave inhumanely, but it also say that polygamy is wrong, but the Bible doesn't... I mean, the Bible actually does say don't do that in Deuteronomy.
It's not whether treating them inhumanely is okay. I'm asking you, is it okay to own someone as property, even if you treat them well?
I would say no, but I would say the ideal... No, I would say that the ideal scenario for any culture wouldn't be even in the state that we have now, because the Leviticus is not stating you the most ideal culture. In fact, it's trying to deal with a broken one.
Well, that's fine, but if God's is God just incapable of dealing with it? He's got to work within it. Can he just... He
has to work with people.
But why give the commands that make it sound like it's okay to be like the other nations? Just do it a little lighter. Why doesn't he just come in and say, hey, don't do this? He was capable of saying don't eat pigs.
Sure.
He's not capable of saying don't own slaves?
I would say, honestly, I mean, I know this isn't the best answer here, but I don't have the mind of God. All I can do is guess and assume, and I'm also not a complete scholar. I don't know the entire context of the culture. I'm just going off of what I know, but from my understanding, it was a good idea at the time because it was something that was, it's either you take your own people and use them for work, or you take people from other nations, use them for work, and ultimately convert them to Judaism, to worshiping the one true God.
But what you're saying is
it's not an ideal culture.
But what you're saying is there are cultures and time periods in which it is a good idea for God to say, hey, owning slaves is great.
I would say when God's kingdom comes here on earth physically at the end of the age, that's going to be the ideal culture, and you won't have any of that.
But that's not that you're just,
no, but what I'm saying is
the problem is there a time period and a culture in which it's okay for God to say slavery is good?
Yes, I would say that, along with other things that we would deem not necessarily so great. Like, for instance, there are times when it's okay to lie. It's okay to, but we essentially, especially we as people, we have these moral obligations. If we need to lie to ultimately save someone's life, we all know that that's okay. But God isn't going to hold you responsible for that.
That's not even remotely the same, because
no, but I'm
good for somebody in that case. Like, you explain, okay, do this. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. These are the commands of the Bible. You explain to me how slavery in any culture fulfills that command to love your neighbor as yourself.
I would say that, for instance, in fact, I think it's Philemon, actually. It's to a slave. Paul writes it to, I don't remember if he was indentured. Maybe it was a slave owner. But he's ultimately telling him to essentially be godly, and because now he's born again, he's a Christian, and he tells the slave to respect his master, and in fact, he even says that in other scenarios, because the job of...
Wasn't he writing that letter to the slaveholder, not to Philemon?
I remember.
No, Philemon is the slave owner. Onesimus is the one that gets saved. And what you're suggesting is, hey, now that he's a Christian, maybe don't treat him like a slave. The rest of your slaves,
But he didn't say to free him. He didn't say to let him
No,
go.
I
he
didn't.
didn't say to him, "Hey, free all your slaves. This is unacceptable." He just
No,
says, "Let
because
this guy off the hook."
it's not that he wouldn't want that, and he might have even said that. We don't have that
Well,
other
wouldn't
letter
have
that he might have said
been
that. But the point,
wouldn't that have been the prime opportunity for Paul to come in one foul swoop and correct all the misunderstandings of the Old Testament and be like, "Hey guys, y'all misunderstood the Old Testament. Slavery's bad. Just don't do it." But he doesn't do that.
yeah, because he agrees with the Old Testament in
But
that
he
it's
doesn't
more about
promote
people
slavery.
being moral. It's more about people acting moral, being moral, and loving God rather than trying to get rid of a culture. And what changes the culture is that people love God. Slavery took an extremely long time to go away, even in Christian circles. And I agree that slavery is not ideal whatsoever. But from my understanding of Leviticus, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and even the rest of the Bible, God is dealing with these people who are, as you can even read the book of Judges, for instance, extremely stubborn. And they go back to all their problems and sins constantly and get themselves in trouble. And they get taken by people that ultimately they're dealing with. So I can't say that I would have written it like that because I'm very blunt. I would have never written Leviticus like that. Or I guess said things to those people, if you get what I mean.
Let's reel this back into skepticism because we're getting a little far into slavery is a huge debate. So I would ask you this: can you see how myself and Ellen are applying skepticism to these scriptures about slavery, and we are looking for a way to falsify this by reading the New Testament and seeing how it doesn't jive with the Old Testament, and we're evaluating your position on how you're reconciling slavery in the Old Testament, and we're using skepticism on the scriptures. And can you see how maybe like you might not be doing that yourself?
I would say that I think it's a good thing. I've had even Christians ask me that question. Every time you guys ask me that, I always want to do more research, and I always want to understand the Bible more, mainly to defend my position because I hold to it, right? I'm biased. I'm a Christian. And I believe that it's true. But see, that's the hard thing is that, and this is really what I like about skepticism, is that I have to actually step back, get out of my comfort zone, and examine my views. I have to actually think critically about this and deconstruct it. Does the Bible
would critical thinking include trying to falsify your position to test it, see if you can prove it wrong?
I wouldn't say critical thinking is that. I would say falsifying is something separate. But yes, I would say falsifying is also important.
So you see how myself and Ellen are trying to falsify this slavery problem. Have you tried to falsify that to like prove yourself wrong here? Because you're bringing justifications to try to like make it better or try to fix it instead of like trying to falsify it. Well, if you can't falsify it, then it holds up. But have you tried to do that like we're doing?
See, that's the thing is that, for instance, if you ask me a question about a position that I hold, I'm probably going to defend it. I'm not going to necessarily just try to knock it down with you, but I would also say, I would say that's probably I wouldn't say it's the best course of action in any scenario. In every scenario, you always want to have deductive reasoning. You don't always want to have falsification. But in my opinion, I would say deductive reasoning is probably the most important, but it's same if you do any falsification.
But falsification is a way to confirm your opinion by being unable to falsify it. So you try to falsify, you're not able to, and then it becomes a theory or a model when you're unable to do that.
Yes.
So
I would say that
we feel like we falsified slavery.
Yeah, I don't think it's
at that.
I don't think it's falsified. And for instance, let me just throw out something because, man, I had it in my head. The train was going and I lost it.
Dude, I get this all the time. That's sorry.
And I appreciate you bringing this up because I will say I do want to get back to the skepticism thing. I do like the conversation about slavery, though. I'm perfectly fine with talking about this stuff. But for instance, one of the commandments that God gives, it's known as the greatest commandment. can't remember what it is called in Hebrew for the Shema, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one Lord. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your might, and with all your soul, and with all your strength or might. I forget what it is in ESV because I don't read it that much. But what he continues with there is, in everything that you do, it should be from your heart. In fact, that's a constant theme throughout Deuteronomy, and even you see it sometimes in Joshua, where there's this specific command to whatever you do it with a heart for God. And that even includes in times when, like for instance, even when you make a mistake or do something wrong, like say if you and a woman have intercourse together and you essentially are okay with that and you do it outside of marriage, you are supposed to get married because, I mean, that's even what, Christian culture is today. That's kind of where they get that idea. Because, we know of the problems and diseases you can get from having sex with multiple people. But there, you're supposed to then, okay, let's get married. It's not ideal that they had intercourse. The most ideal situation is just get rid of that sin. But the problem is that the people did that. So you can't just get rid of that sin. So instead, after they do that, they're supposed to now love each other or be a good husband and wife, but with also really just a heart for God. So that's why I would say that's why I don't think slavery goes to the extent of, or the same as, at the very least, as slavery that we had in America or even the Egyptians, because even God says to, you were slaves in Egypt, do not treat your slaves. I totally forget what passage that is, but he says, don't treat slaves the same as you were treated. Even he says strangers, don't treat strangers or people not in your country the same as you were treated in Egypt. So I think there's more to it than just, this is the same degree of slavery. I think it's still, it's something that you would call slavery, and also indentured servitude is there. I think there's both, but I wouldn't say it's the same.
All right,
if you get what I'm saying. So.
I think all of these issues that we're talking about from the Bible, they kind of are peripheral issues or symptomatic issues that I don't think are going to solve our question of skepticism today, because now we're talking about interpretations of the text. And I mean, neither Elliot nor I believe the Bible is even a true story. So we're debating something we don't even think is true. And really, I'm not sure how it's true. But that's also another issue altogether. But I want to get to this question because you had said a few things really early on, and I wanted to come back to them.
Yes.
One of the things you said was all of the evidence that you have for God doesn't prove Yahweh. There isn't sufficient evidence to demonstrate Yahweh is the God who designed and created everything. So my first question is, how did you draw the conclusion, therefore, that Yahweh is the God who is the creator of the universe and all this, if you don't have the evidence to sufficiently take you there? How did you draw that conclusion?
Yeah, I would say that from what I see in science, which includes physics, biology, quantum physics, I think that leads to some type of creator, some type of mind that's self-existent. One of the things that I think is certainly a connection, because I would say that from the science that I understand, this being has to be theistic, not polytheistic, or even
deistic.
Or even deistic, possibly deistic. But that's not something that I would say scientifically you can have great evidence for. I would just think that something that creates, especially a world so wonderful, would need some degree of personhood, some type of personality to some degree. But that's just, I can't give a math equation for that. But I would say that one connection is that in in Genesis, when God reveals himself to Moses, he calls himself Ahiyah Ser Ahiyah. He says, tell the Israelites, Ahiyah Ser Ahiyah has sent you, which is just, I am that I am, which is it's a claim that in this ancient time, no God has made. There's no legend, there's no God of any being ever making the claim of essentially self-existence, like independent. Even says he calls himself Yahweh. That means self-existent one. Now, that's just a connection. That's all that is. But that's one thing that pulls me in. Even just the first chapter of Genesis is very explicit in its argumentation against other cosmogonies, which at the time were very filled with either war or just how other gods essentially in these legends created the world, and even some of them material the things that are material has existed alongside of the gods for eternity, and some of these. But the very first verse is that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And that from the very start, God is already there. Doesn't mean, it's not trying to say right there, he's independent, he's self-existent, but it is trying to say that he existed before what is material, what is, essentially a supernatural being. And it's not that... Sorry. No, that's okay. Absolutely. Ask a question.
So it seems like this doesn't sound like skepticism to me.
Okay.
It sounds to me like you already decided the Bible is true, and you already decided that God exists.
Yeah, which I have.
And you're just drawing from your preconceived ideas conclusions that you already believe to be true. You're not depending on the evidence to take you there. You're using the evidence to drive you. Like you're driving the evidence to where you want it to take you, rather than letting the evidence take you where you want. How did you even determine that the Bible is true to get this Shema or whatever you were talking about, the God is that I am, whatever? How did you even draw the conclusion that you're just going to trust the Bible as the source for all truth, which you either, if you're beginning with something must exist, okay, you just jumped to it must be Yahweh. Why? Oh, because this book tells me so. Well, why is the book true? Well, because I just decided it's true. Where did you draw all these conclusions? Like it seems like you're leaping everywhere and drawing conclusions. And I'm asking you, what is the evidence that demonstrates any of this for you to actually draw conclusions from?
Right. Yeah, I think that's an important question, because I will say that the way that I think, I can't necessarily always bring that out into words. I may seem eloquent, or maybe I don't, but I oftentimes have a struggle actually taking my thoughts and putting them into words. So I can tell you that I think this way. I can even tell you the conclusions that I've come to, but it's difficult to give you the long explanation of exactly how that I came to that very specific conclusion. But I would say, just trying to answer your question, the biggest thing for me is that I saw the Bible real in my life, and that specifically what a Christian is, what a Christian does, and the changes that Jesus makes in people. That's one of the biggest things for me, is that I have seen person after person, being a pastor's kid. I've been to many, many houses and people who have not necessarily rejected God, but kind of like the Israelites. They worship God and also a lot of other gods at the same time, if you know what I mean. And it's not that they're terrible people. They're really nice people, but their lives are absolutely disfigured, and they don't have any real joy. There's no real love for life, even though it seems like they're having a great time with all the things that they're doing, but they couldn't be more unloving, unhappy. And it's not to say that happiness, if you have happiness, that's the correct worldview, because I don't believe that. But I would say that if the Bible claims that there is this peace that passes all understanding, like it's just something you can't really comprehend, just keeps coming up. And then you see that in your parents and in people around you who have accepted this and have accepted Jesus, and they just snap. They're completely different types of people. Now, psychologically, you can chop that down to just their beliefs ultimately determine their psychological state, which I do agree. But my question is, why is it that Christianity, every single time when you have someone who's genuine, always turns to the positive side? It's not that you don't have cases where you have atheists who, will turn to the positive side. It's that with from what I've seen in Christianity, it's always to the positive when it's real, when it's genuine.
Okay. So let's pause right there.
Absolutely.
Let's pause right there. Let's try a hypothetical. Let's say there's another religion out there on the other side of the world, and it reproduces these results to a T, exactly like Christianity. It's got changed lives just like this, changed in a second by affirming some kind of being, personal being. They've got miracle stories. They've got a text, maybe not dissimilar to the Bible, but it has the same, I am that I am. It's got a creation story. It duplicates all the aspects of Christianity, but uses a different story, and it's a different God and a different text. But it's exactly the same with these real world results. And then you here in America, you've got Christianity, you got your personal experiences, you got the same exact thing that you've witnessed. How could you tell the difference between the two if they're both producing the same results? Like, how would you determine yours is true, but the other one is false when the results are the same? How would you go about using skepticism to determine which one is actually correct?
Yeah, well, I would say from there, probably that's a great question, because that leads me up to my next thing is I would say probably historical evidence. I think historical evidence is the biggest thing for the resurrection of Christ. Now, I know you disagree, but I would say
I'm
that...
just curious. Well, I'm not going to fight you on that.
Sure.
My next question would be, okay, well, what historical evidence exactly?
So, for instance, one of my biggest concerns is just the text itself being preserved. And
let's say they've got that too, because you mentioned historical evidence, so the text is different.
Yeah, but if we have preserved text, we can verify that it's original, if you get what I'm saying.
But it's not. That's not a historical claim. That's a textual claim.
Well, you would need to know history in order to have the textual claim, if you get what I'm saying. Like, you need to actually know where the text came from.
Preserving a book is different from having historical evidence for the book.
Like, if you're saying it's only forensic, I agree. I just think history also has empirical, but I do understand what you're getting at. And I would say from there, then you would, one of the biggest things is probably comparing and contrasting, but maybe that's more empirical. Well,
we've already done the compare and contrast, and we've got
I would say
a mirror religion that does the same thing, has the same elements.
No, but I mean, I get what you're saying. Well, at that point you would, it would be a lot of actually reading the text. If you have it preserved properly, you'd read it. You would attempt to falsify the claims of the person you can do it with the intent, maybe just the intent of trying to falsify them. It's really hard because you have bias either way. Either you try to test them that they're true or test them that they're false. But anyways, you attempt to falsify the claims of the person. Is this person trustworthy? Can you actually believe that this person is in fact in his right mind when he's writing this, but just through his life? Can you actually, that's an immense amount of examination.
I believe that I can falsify all of those elements from the Bible.
Sure.
And I can show my work.
Sure, but I would disagree that it's been falsified, and in fact, I think it's been shown more and more that the only plausible answer is that Jesus is risen from the dead. But of course, I'm a Christian, so of course I believe that, and I'm not saying that without bias because I do have some. But I would say for certainty that the disciples, or at least Luke, Matthew, Mark, and John, are trustworthy first of all, for one of the things is that one of the things that Luke has always done super well, and this is just a small piece, but has gotten places, names correct that even Josephus didn't get correct.
All right, so hang on.
And also,
all of this. So, I mean, I'm just going to fast forward through everything you're saying, because what's going on here is that all of the evidence that you're saying you have for things like the resurrection of Jesus take place in the book itself that makes the claim that Jesus rose from the dead.
not all of it, no. In fact, I would say probably the majority of it is outside.
What evidence do you have for Jesus' resurrection outside of the Bible?
Well, for one thing, I would say we have, let's see, I know that we have some references to the claims of the Christians of the time, like from Josephus, Tacitus.
Like the claims came from the Bible. So if you reference the claims, you're referencing essentially the stories.
Well, no, because
there are no contemporaries of Jesus outside the Bible that makes this claim.
Well, Josephus wouldn't have been, I mean, he would have been a contemporary.
No, he wouldn't have.
He was writing at the end of the first century.
He wrote
writing in like 90.
Yeah, he was like 68 AD when he turned to, so yeah, he wouldn't have been a contemporary.
There are no contemporaries to validate this at all.
Well, I would say Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all contemporaries.
But that's where we get the claims from.
From the Bible.
Of course. Just like
so
with
we don't,
anything
outside of the Bible. We're asking for evidence outside of the Gospels.
And
but we don't. I agree we don't have contemporaries, but that doesn't mean you can't trust them. It's the same with Alexander the Great. You don't have a contemporary writing about Alexander the Great. But what you do have is evidence.
The problem,
but Alexander the Great didn't rise from the dead.
I agree. But I think there's a lot more evidence for Jesus than him.
No, listen, the problem with this is, number one, all of these people from the Bible are not evidence. They are claims. These are the claims. They are not,
and you test those claims, just like in a court.
Test the claims, and that's the problem.
Say that again?
There's no way to test their claims. That's the problem.
Of course there is. Just like with any ancient document, how you know something is a legend or false. There are, I think there's seven specific things you have to go through. But for one of the things is testing if they're trustworthy. Just like if you were in a court case, you would test the witness.
Here's the problem is the question isn't whether they are trustworthy. You can be trustworthy and still be wrong.
Sure, I agree.
So there's no way to validate that the claims they made actually happened. Even if you with 100% certainty that they were trustworthy, they could still be insane. We have no idea.
Well, I guess
that what they claimed was true.
Well, in a sense, forensic evidence can only go so far. Same with empirical. You couldn't be 100% for certain. I can't be 100% for certain that Jesus rose from the dead just from historical evidence, which would be forensic. But I can be very sure.
On it.
Yeah, but that's for other reasons as well. Again, I have lots of reasons that I believe Christianity is true, and I've attempted to falsify them by not just asking myself questions, but actually going through the logic of other ideas constantly through my head. What about this? 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 And every single time I come to the conclusion that Christianity is still true. So one time it's this part, and one time it's this part.
And yeah, what I'm saying is much like the resurrection, and much like it being Yahweh, with every single one of your things that you have this whole stack. Every one of them is, well, we can't know conclusively from this, and we can't know conclusively from this, or from this, or from this. But if we stack them all together, all this inconclusive stuff, we can draw a conclusion that's conclusive?
No, not necessarily. I would say that any evidence that you get is merely a piece to the puzzle. And if you fill the puzzle 99.9%, then at least in my opinion, it's worth believing in, because that's where faith comes in. But I think that all the pieces are filled.
There it is.
I think all the pieces are filled, though. I don't have that much faith.
No, you see, if you have to have faith to draw your conclusion, then you do not have sufficient evidence.
But if you believe that skepticism is something that's true, then you have faith that that's true. You can't prove that 100% because you have a fallible mind.
That's not a thing that requires faith.
Oh yeah, anything that you believe in. Like if you go out and drive your car into the street, you
need
have to have
to
faith.
not believe something.
Well, you have faith to believe something, and you have faith to believe the other position.
But that is not a position. It is not a position to not agree, not believe something. That's not a position.
No, but if you say Christianity is false from the evidence that you've compiled, and then you've come to a conclusion, like that's still a conclusion. I agree. You know, there's an agnostic. That person doesn't technically have any faith because there's not anything that person actually believes in.
If we're all starting at ground zero and you come along and you say, hey, there's a God, his name's Yahweh, he created the universe, and his son, Jesus Christ, came, he died, and he rose from the dead. You've just now made a gigantic claim that needs actual evidence to prove it. And you have inconclusive evidence, as you've admitted, and then you say, oh, and the rest of the way, I just have faith.
I said some of it's inconclusive.
That validates your conclusion. You're just drawing it based on faith. You might as well not even present evidence because you don't need it if you have acquired faith anyway.
I have a lot less faith than you'd think, but what I'm ultimately saying is that parts of it, they're not inconclusive as much as not proof, but I wouldn't consider that inconclusive because, again, for Alexander the Great, I cannot 100% prove that he existed, but I can be very sure, very, very sure.
Alexander the Great,
the writings,
my life, whereas Jesus is like the most important thing in history.
I agree. Yes, and he's completely changed the entire world. Time is split in two.
That's a good place to. That's a good place to.
Yeah,
pause.
It was someone else that did that.
That's a good place to pause. I want to try something new here.
Sure,
Samuel. I'm going to tell you why I'm not a Christian, and I want you to tell me where I'm wrong here. So, in legal doctrine, there's something called fruit of the poisonous tree, and what it means is that if you are conducting an investigation and you violate someone's rights in a way where you acquire evidence without having a justification to acquire that evidence, like you go into a house without a search warrant, anything you find is therefore inadmissible because it is fruit of the poisonous tree. Because you did the wrong thing at the beginning means you can't use anything that you got through bad methods. So our foundation as Christians is the gospel. Okay, that's our search warrant to get in the house. Anything that follows after that, your experience, the impact Christianity has had on the world, modern miracle claims like answers to prayer, anything else is built on that foundation. So if I focus directly on the Gospels, the four Gospels, and possibly the writings of Paul, and I am able to falsify that foundation, I'm able to destroy that foundation and come to the conclusion that the Gospels cannot be trusted. They have huge problems, historical, logical, evidential. If I destroy that foundation, that destroys everything else that comes after that. It was built on a faulty foundation. Like your personal experience, if the Gospels are false, your personal experience is faulty. It came from somewhere else. So my claim is that using skepticism, I can tear apart the Gospels, completely destroy that foundation where I absolutely cannot believe them anymore. And therefore, I can throw away all the fruit of the poisonous tree that comes after that. Any claim you want to make about Christianity, changing lives, a personal experience, it's all gone. Am I justified if I can destroy that foundation? Am I justified in not being a Christian anymore?
Yeah, I would say that I wouldn't believe that Christianity is true with that same degree. I would probably still hold to some of the religious claims and even of the Old Testament because, well, that's assuming it's actually done good to the world, which I do believe it has. But yeah, I wouldn't believe that from there it's literally true because
So
I think that's completely correct.
Shouldn't that be exactly where we start? Is we start with the foundation. We start with the Gospels, and we examine those using principles of skepticism to see if they hold up.
Yes, but not just skepticism, because I believe that it's good.
Any method that you want to use to test those Gospels. That should be where we start, is with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and maybe Paul.
Maybe Paul. I love that.
Well, maybe Paul, because Paul wrote
letters
before the first gospel was written. So I mean, maybe Paul was.
Which I disagree with that. I think Mark was written earlier, but that's my opinion. So,
Right.
um,
But that's something that can be examined.
Absolutely, yes.
So any other discussion is a red herring. Any discussion about personal experience or like why you maintain a belief, like what has happened to you personally, that's like something else.
Yeah, and I would say
it boils down to the Gospels.
I would say this is a little off topic, but I think this is important. This is the one interesting thing about people is that they will believe something without necessarily having all of the evidence. But I think it's because we realize that we won't, in a sense, ever have all of it because, again, we're still human. Even our brains still have a limited capacity. And it's not like we'll remember I've watched so many videos, listened to so many philosophers, read books, lots of books. I say lots of books. I sound like Trump when I say that. I haven't actually read that many, but well, compared to my mom, but I have, in my opinion, seen enough evidence, and so therefore I'm convinced, right? So that's the thing, is that you may even have buckets and bucket loads, but that doesn't necessarily convince you. That doesn't mean necessarily you don't have enough faith. It could be so many other reasons. So, but I do think it is important that you essentially, if you don't know that something is true, you should be skeptical of the things that come from that ideology. Like, for instance, Christianity. I completely agree, and I understand your guys' skepticism, and even if you go to cynicism, I don't think you do that a lot. I think all of us do that with other things, but I think that you guys are justified in that because you don't believe that it's true. But I believe that it is, and I think that you should believe it. But that's the thing, is that because I believe that it is true, then I hold to these Christian values. I read my Bible every single morning, not because I'm trying to necessarily convince myself, although sometimes I actually do read it like asking, is this passage about American slavery that we know today? I actually did that. I read that passage recently. But I go to it knowing that I believe that it's true, right? I know that this camera is working, so I sat down and I started talking to you guys. I see you guys, so I'm assuming based off of that you're real humans. I can't necessarily 100% verify it. I mean, there are ways, but I still jump into this with some faith, and trusting that you guys will be kind to me, and I appreciate your guys' kindness and your questions. And so I don't know if that completely goes on the path that you're looking for.
Well, what I'm looking for is we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that tell a story.
Yes.
And they claim that it actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a claim. And that's a claim from 2,000 years ago.
Yes.
And everything else that follows after that aside, everything, just throw it all away and just look at that. Hey, here's a story. Why should I believe the story? Like, I don't have any reason to believe the story itself is actually true.
Like, do you want me to go into why I think that it is true, or just like, because I agree with you.
I would love for you to tell me why you think the story is true, without any personal experience, without any of the things that follow in the next 2,000 years. Let's pretend we are 2,000 years ago, and we just got a delivery in the mail with the Gospel of Luke. That's all I've got. Like, why would I believe him?
I would ask who sent that. Why?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where it first starts to fall apart, is we don't know who sent it.
Yeah, but I would say, for instance, now I have come to this conclusion, but I'm telling you what I've come to, that it is actually written by Luke, that the written tradition is actually Luke from that time frame, not just
well, I know that's what you believe, but why do you believe it's from Luke?
Yes, and I'm saying because first of all, because of the early church fathers from 80s, 90s, 100, 110, 120, they ultimately give the name Luke. Also,
only one of them does.
Yes, but then also Paul.
He doesn't say why. See, the rest of the early church fathers quoted the first church father who said Luke. And in his writings, he never said why he thought it was Luke. He just said it was Luke. So
yeah,
it's like and he came and that early church father existed like 2 to 3 generations after
yeah,
the Gospel of Luke would have been written.
but that's
So
still too short for
a-
there to be a legend. So it's
But he has a
still
burden of proof to say how he knows that, which he does not fulfill.
not
It's
necess-
hearsay.
No, but he's dead. He has no burden of proof anymore. So ultimately,
He had at the time. I mean,
but
that's why we use modern standards
Yes.
of evidence instead of like, hey, I take my word for it.
yeah, people were more, well, I wouldn't say people were more trustworthy back then because that's not necessarily true. But your word was how you spread things. I mean, a lot of the people back then didn't even know how to read or write. And so that was an amazing privilege. The fact that Jesus is able to speak words in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek is amazing. That's just not normal. But I guess that's normal for a rabbi. But
Well,
I would
yeah,
say
let's
that
say 100
that's
years.
evidence. That's a question. Hey, how do we know that Luke is actually the one writing this? Because he says that it is. At this point, there's this belief that Luke is the one who written this. And not 200 years later, not 300, about 100 or 70 years.
Let's say that the first church father to mention Luke's name was 100 years after Luke was written.
Okay.
We are in 2026. That would be a guy, in 1926 writing. Well, no, 100 years is a long time. Is
21, 26. Yep.
100 years. So 100 years after it was, if it's like saying something was written in 1926, and today is the first guy that says, "Hey, this is the author." Like, you're living in 2026. You were not alive in 1926. Like, how can you know who wrote that?
Well,
like, that you're 3 generations removed.
Well, and again, that brings up a question, but you ultimately, I would say that another reason is because Paul even mentions Luke and talks about him and his mother and his grandmother and their faith, and
Maybe that's where the early church father figured out on his own that, hey, it must
possibly
be Luke, just because Paul mentioned him, but Paul didn't say that he wrote it.
Yes, but we can also. I forget where
you see how this is like really, really thin evidence.
No, I don't think it's.
But again, this is.
I wouldn't say it's
their claims. There's no evidence to substantiate any of this.
Well, no, but someone making a claim isn't evidence that person believes that, and then you ask the question.
The person believed it, but it's not evidence for the topic at hand.
Yeah, but I would ask, why does he believe that? Why does Paul ultimately talk about Luke?
We can't know why they believed it, apparently.
And why is
it a claim? They clearly believe.
What I mean, Ellen, is that it's the first problem that you run into. The very first is like, where did it even come from? Who wrote it? And like, even right there, forget the claims themselves. It's like, why would I don't even know who wrote it before I can even get to the claim. Like,
well,
you got to be able to trust your sources. You have to know where stuff came from first.
Sure. And I would say another thing is also in the very start of Luke. I know he doesn't mention his name, but he does say that he's ultimately doing this to compile he says, an orderly account of the things that you were instructed of, O excellent Theophilus. He's writing this to someone as essentially a letter. But what's interesting about it is that he writes it.
He's telling someone that he investigated the matter, and these are his findings.
Yes.
Luke is not an eyewitness. Like, I think it's pretty clear from just his introduction. He's not an eyewitness. So
but he's saying that he's ultimately talking to witnesses.
He didn't say that.
He does say that he investigated witnesses who, I wish I had my Bible.
Yeah, he does. He's interviewing people, yes.
We can go straight to it. I got the internet right in front of me. We can go to Luke 1.
But like, even so, like, all of this is contingent on this idea that this.
Can I read Luke 1 real fast?
What's that?
Could I read Luke 1 real fast? Like, just the first couple of verses? It says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you. So he's talking about things that have been handed down.
Yes.
He's
But
he says many others have undertaken to draw up an account. So he might even be pulling directly from the other gospels.
Yeah,
Like
possibly.
this is like not firsthand information, and he does not say he got them from the witnesses. He
Right.
just said they were handed down to us from the first eyewitnesses.
Right. But again, that doesn't mean you can't trust it. He could be really good. I mean, just even how he writes in his Greek, it's very proper. It's very formal. He is very well educated, which is clearly seen from his writings. Just from that, he's very knowledgeable, and he's very orderly as well. Extremely organized. That is someone who's intelligent. Just right off from that, someone who has learned things, who understands things, even at least from what I remember, that Paul is the one who ultimately said he was a physician, so he would have probably written down things.
Here's an alternative hypothesis. See, this is a trope. The veracity claims in fiction are actual trope that people use. I've read this in a lot of novels where someone's writing in the first person and they're going to tell a story, and so they give you some bona fide. Even though we know it's fiction, he's like, "Hey, I looked into this. You know, this is." He tells you he's going to tell you the story. And
can you give me evidence or like give me an example?
Well, for example, Stephen King is infamous for doing this in a lot of his fiction. He'll write in the first person as the person telling the story.
Oh, I mean like ancient though.
I don't know. I'm not a scholar of ancient literature, but I'm just giving you an alternative. Like perhaps he has heard these stories for many years, and now he's going to write his own version of it. Maybe he's a Greek novelist. Maybe he's a Greek Christian. Whatever the fact is, he decides, hey, I'm going to do this, and this is going to be my opener because it's going to like give power to the story. Hey, I've looked into this. I've investigated this. Oh, Theophilus, and hey, I'm going to give you an account. And it could be that nothing that follows after that has any basis or grounding in reality necessarily. He's just telling a story from piecing together things he's heard. I mean, it could be third, fourth hand. It could be completely made up.
Yeah, and I agree. But one of my questions would be, why would he take the time to get all of the names of people and the names of places correct?
That's what you do. That's what you do when you write historical fiction. You try to be absolutely as accurate as possible. Setting the story in a real place and time.
Well, from what I understand, historical fiction has never existed in this culture ever. That would be a completely brand new thing that no one.
He was writing in Greek, so maybe he wasn't.
Yeah, Koine Greek, but in Greek culture
Hebrew,
it doesn't exist.
Aramaic.
Yes, but even in Greek culture, we have reason to believe he did know some Aramaic. But anyways,
but he could be coming from a literary culture north of the Mediterranean, and like perhaps that made perfect sense for him to be doing that, writing historical fiction.
Yes, but again, Josephus even gets some names wrong, but Luke gets them right. Like I think it was the high priest that.
But he also
Josephus
gets the
got
census.
Wrong.
He gets the census wrong.
No, I don't believe he did. In fact, I think there's good evidence that actually happened. Because in that time in ancient cultures, when a ruler or a king and his throne was in trouble, one of the things that they would do would be take a census and ultimately to organize people. And now that's a guess that's what Herod did, but it's not unusual for him to do that.
Records, and we know. Well, it doesn't say Herod did it. It says Caesar Augustus.
Caesar Augustus. I said Herod. I meant him.
We know in the historical record that he did not do that during that time.
No, that's not true.
So
we just don't have it.
Something different.
We just don't have it. That doesn't mean he didn't do it.
The burden
but
of
it's
proof
possible.
Is on the one making the claim.
Yeah, but he's saying that it happened. Why don't you just start with the assumption it's true and then falsify it?
No historians have any cause to believe that that's true.
Well, no, I think they do. And again, this is stuff that I've learned, is that we have instances of this happening in irregular census. And just because we don't have yes, an irregular census from Rome. No, I'm sorry. From Egypt, that this was something they did during this time frame. It was boy, it was like,
But that's much different because this is coming from Rome. It's coming from Caesar himself. So
Sure.
we have records. We have absolutely have records of something like that happening, and we don't have a record of that.
yeah, it could have easily been destroyed. Parchment. I mean, no problem. That stuff gets destroyed easily. There's a reason that even the Gospels that we have are much further out.
But we know that they did conduct censuses in that same
Yes.
general time period. We have records
Yes.
of that.
Yes.
There's no record of this census.
Yeah, but
so why would we have records of one but not another? I mean, you're making an argument from silence, essentially.
no, it would be actually you would be doing that because you're saying we haven't found it, so therefore
But
it didn't happen.
You're inserting something into silence.
No, I'm saying it's possible.
An inverse argument from silence, like, oh well, we don't have it, but we're going to assume it did happen, even though.
Well, this is what I would do. I would just ignore that piece if you're not for certain and go on to other parts. If Luke is trustworthy in other areas, why shouldn't you trust that? If he's historical and correct in, say, for instance, his archaeology, not archaeology, sorry,
because
his geography.
Because he's not telling a firsthand account.
Yeah,
That's
but so for instance, onomastic congruence, do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, that's okay. It's fine. Most people don't. I learned it recently. But it's a new way of examining cultures, and mostly if documents are actually true, it has to do with the names of the time. They can even get as close to, I think, even like a few months of the general names that would be in that time. And the score that's given to a lot of ancient documents is really, really low. It's like less than 10%. And even Josephus scores actually quite low. He only gets 10% onomastic congruence. 10% of the names are actually, they can verify were names of the time.
So
Luke
why
gets
is Luke
60%.
getting it right?
It gets
Why do you think-
60%.
Why do you
Because
think
he
Luke's getting it
lived
right?
in that time frame, and he actually knew those people, or at least he talked to people who knew those people. That doesn't mean it's true, but it does mean he's
that at all.
no. But what I'm ultimately saying is that's a piece. That means that he took his time, and he actually got people who actually did live in that time. You can at least trust that from there, right? And then you would go from there, and then, for instance, another thing is geography. Luke gets nothing about geography wrong. In fact, archaeology has only continued to prove him true. Now, that's a loaded thing to say because, it's good to investigate that, actually look into that. But at least from my own investigation, respected scholars that I've heard, that is in fact true.
If I had a modern historian that got everything absolutely correct, I would still have no reason to believe.
Well, you would have some reason.
If he gave me an extraordinary claim about an event that was supernatural, I would have no reason to believe that, even if he got all the place names correct.
Yeah, but that would mean that he's educated. It would mean that he's trustworthy to a degree, and that he's taking his time. He's doing things right. He's actually trying to get correct information.
He's trustworthy to represent the information, but it doesn't mean that information was accurate. It doesn't mean that
sure
incorrectly, and it doesn't mean it was true.
But it means he cares about the truth.
Right. And what we're going around in circles here is, if the Bible says it must be true. Like, that's really what we're going at, because no matter what it is,
well,
it's always going to be true.
No, because the Bible can say something.
What's that?
I said the Bible can say something, and it's not necessarily trying to make a claim. It doesn't always make claims.
No, but you get my point, though, that if it's making a claim, then it's a true claim. That would be your argument, because you can't get it. You can't.
Well, yeah, that's because I believe that it's true. Just like if I read a science book, I believe that it's true. I did nothing to verify it, but I still trust it.
I wouldn't make that conclusion. I wouldn't know if it's true until I read it. But here's the thing. Let me just ask you a hypothetical.
Sure.
If the Bible did not exist, just for a moment, imagine you just did not have the Bible at all. Would you believe in the supernatural?
Yes, because I think nature shows that the supernatural exists.
That would make it nature.
Yeah, but I would say nature points to the supernatural. In other words, nature. For instance, the contingency argument.
You're using all the like the apologetic arguments. Let's just say I grant all the.
I didn't get this from apologists. I came up with this.
Cosmology, whatever, like the cosmological argument, the argument of design, like whatever, all these arguments.
Yeah, and if they're good, then it's. I mean, that's important to think about.
They simply demonstrate that there's something beyond the universe, but it doesn't tell you anything other than that. It doesn't say it's supernatural. You're drawing a supernatural conclusion based on a preconceived idea that you were taught.
Well, if nature is being what is created, then henceforth it's beyond nature, which would be what, metaphysical, if you want to say? You could say it's a metaphysical being. It's not physical. It's metaphysical.
We don't know that. What we know is the laws that exist in this universe. We don't know what the universe out. We don't know what's beyond this universe.
Well, we don't know 100%.
Correct.
But just like we know that the laws of logic exist, right? We kind of assume that those exist.
In the universe, they do.
Yeah, but we assume that those exist. I'm not saying I assume that God exists, but I'm using those laws to essentially reason to the fact that if nature, this is just simple reasoning. If nature is created, then what caused it, I guess, to exist cannot be nature. So it'd be supra. Is that a better word? Supernatural?
Why? That's not necessarily
because
true.
Nature is not caused yet. It hasn't been caused yet. So that means when there's nothing, or I guess nothing, nature, then that means the cause cannot be nature.
No, it may not be nature according to the nature we know in this universe, but it may be a nature of a different sort that we don't understand.
Yeah, but that's an argument from, it's a logical fallacy because it's based off of what you don't know.
No, I'm not making an argument for something. I'm saying we are inconclusive. Therefore, the best answer is I don't know.
Well, I'm conclusive.
Therefore, God.
No, I'm not saying therefore God. I'm just saying that if nature comes into existence, my question, well, it's just simple logic, is that space, matter, and time and energy came into existence into one point. This is what I believe. And that ultimately what has to be the cause for that cannot be of material. It has to be materialless. It has to have extreme amounts of power, lots of energy, not necessarily infinite.
How can material come from materiallessness?
Well, I would say mind is probably the best answer for that.
How can material come from a mind? If the mind is not material,
if the mind has power and mind has causal powers. We create ideas all the time. Those are metaphysical. So
they don't
if mind has,
they don't create matter.
Yes, but
a mind is, if you're saying a non-physical thing created a physical thing.
Yes.
How can you create a physical thing from a non-physical thing?
Well, ultimately, if that law, that rule that you're essentially asking about doesn't exist. So if the rule that, it's essentially in...
Hang on, you just said, you exactly said what I was trying to get at. You just said it. You said, beyond this universe, that law doesn't exist, which is the point.
Well, not even necessarily, because...
this universe to draw your conclusion about God. And I'm saying we don't know what the laws of the cosmos is outside of this universe. So how do you know that it's supernatural?
No, you would just beyond. Okay, that's what I'm guessing. Again, it's not 100% sure.
Okay,
I've concluded, yes, that it is true. But again, it's my opinion. That's why I say it's my opinion, and you're disagreeing with me.
You don't know for sure, and yet you're still saying you know for sure.
I don't know for sure if I'm going to drive my car tonight, or actually tomorrow morning, and get into a crash or hit a deer, right? But I still do it because I want money, and I literally risk my life on even my car working. I fixed a lot on my car, and I'm not 100% sure, and everything's tightened down properly. In fact, sometimes it makes noise, but I still base my life on it.
You're not going to turn around then and say, "But I am sure."
I would say that it's lasted up until now, so I'll keep doing it. So
but that's because you have confidence based upon experience.
Exactly.
And that's called confidence.
Exactly. And there's experience in there. And I have experience from Christianity and also logic. And also, so I don't just have the logic, because logic by itself doesn't do anything. It doesn't cause me to do anything.
Samuel, what's illogical is material coming from a mind, coming from something non-material. That is illogical.
I wouldn't say...
Because we have absolutely no evidence or examples of that ever happening.
Well, would you say that energy...
I am a mind, and I cannot create matter using my mind.
Sure,
saying
but
that
that's because
there
you're
is a mind
valuable
beyond.
and
You're
finite.
saying you're adding something here, but it's really important. Really, you're adding a mind outside of the universe that is not material, yet it can create material.
Yep. Yeah, and I
That's
would
illogical.
not necessarily. No, for instance, if I can create
Well, it's
energy
illogical
from
for
matter.
you to. It's illogical for you to imagine that, because that's what you're doing. You're imagining. That's because that's all you have really is this is an assumption. This is a belief. You
Sure.
are imagining a mind outside of the universe that is non-material that can create matter.
Yeah, that has power and causal powers.
You're imagining that is illogical.
I don't think that's
You're not basing that. You're not basing that in anything.
No, I would say, for instance, inside of a black hole, this comes from Einstein's field equations that Roger Penrose and Stephen Hawking kind of expanded upon, which is where they actually Stephen Hawking was the one who came up with the idea of a black hole, and that's the Big Bang. It's where essentially all the rules of the universe break down completely into where it's an infinite orb that essentially. But my question is that because if you keep turning the clock backwards,
well,
it goes to
do black holes govern the universe? Are those minds? Like
no,
what
but
if on
those
the other
go
side
into
of every
nothing.
Black hole is maybe it's a whole other universe. Every black hole is the opposite side is a whole other universe.
Like in a sense, possibly, but
like each one of those is a big bang that is sucking matter from our universe into
but from
creating a whole nother one.
Yes, but from what we understand is that if again you take that clock and you go backwards to the very beginning and beyond the beginning, it's just nothing. So, but then everything, if you start it forward from zero, you have everything.
Beyond the beginning is a black hole. Beyond our beginnings is another black hole.
How do you know that?
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I know that.
No, the problem with that.
Confidence. I know that with just as much confidence as you have asserted there is a mind outside of our universe.
No, because
it's an assumption.
No, because a black hole doesn't. First of all, from what we have observed in the laws of logic, or in at least the laws that, not laws of logic, the laws that black holes obey, they don't necessarily just create more black holes like that, and then you just get in this infinite regress of black holes. You need ultimately, because that there is a logical problem with that. You don't have then a cause, and you don't have a starting of time. We have come to a specific time today. If you have an infinite amount of causes, you don't have a start of time. If you have a beginning of time, then the question is, what began the clock?
Why does there have to be a beginning of time? Like, how do we know that that's true?
From what we've observed, and from even what Roger Penrose and Stephen Hawking worked on with and took from Einstein's, I believe it was his theory of relativity, and expanded upon that. And this is something Roger Penrose even came to, and even conclusion that he didn't necessarily like, but he concluded that because if you take the clock, say now, and you go backwards all the way to the beginning and even beyond that, there's actually nothing, right? Because we see the expansion, we see the clock has moved forward. So if you take, say, for instance,
I understand all this.
Yeah, it goes to zero, which is mathematically nothing.
What they haven't done with the mathematics is shown that there's a mind behind that.
No, but the question is, yes, but it makes sense to posit something that isn't material, but it's what we know in the universe exists.
It does not. It does not make sense. That's some completely illogical.
Well, that's what
something non-material, and that's where the material came from. Something non-material.
Yes, but if I take, say, me as a person, right? I have causal powers. I can work as an agent in this universe. I can take matter and turn it into energy. Like, for instance, if I take paper and I set it on fire, I turn it into plasma. Okay, that the matter isn't like it's there, but it's conserved. But it's also not there anymore. So in that sense, I'm actually changing something into something else that's not material. I'm taking material.
Are you doing that with your mind?
My mind is interacting with my brain, so I can't necessarily completely explain that.
But you're doing this physical process with something non-physical.
I would say in that sense that yes, that my mind is interacting with my brain and doing that. I would say actually that's where us being created in the image of God comes from. One of the things. But yes, in my opinion, my mind, which is metaphysical, is interacting with my physical brain.
How do you know your mind is non-physical? How can you show it's apart from your brain?
That is a lot of philosophy. No, I think it's something we can, to a degree, though. I wouldn't say that. See, that's I mean, if you want to go down this rabbit hole, we can. But I did want to say I do have to get going soon.
My train of thought that I was taking you to earlier. So
sure.
So I asked you, if you didn't have the Bible, would you know? Would you still draw the conclusion that the supernatural exists? And you said yes. And then you said your reason is because you have all these Christian experiences. You've seen all these Christians, this and that.
No, I would say science.
Where does science draw a conclusion of the supernatural apart from the Bible?
The fact that it's contingent, one of those things. Science is not independent. You need another thing is math, for instance. Math also is contingent. It's contingent on minds in order to exist. Yeah. Why is it the universe is mathematically consistent? Posit a mind.
In this universe, based on the laws that we do know and that we do have, you can draw a lot of those conclusions, but you cannot say that logic works the same way outside of this universe.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
Way you know,
but I would never do that in science because that's unfalsifiable.
So that's why we don't draw conclusions about what happened prior to the universe, and you do.
No, but I can.
You're drawing a conclusion called God, and we're saying we don't know. That's the difference.
Yes, but I think that it's a good reason. I think it's a good idea.
And it's not. You may ponder it and say, "Hey, here's one possibility. Cool." But you can't. You must withhold. You must withhold belief until there's sufficient evidence to hold to it.
Yeah, and I think there's sufficient
to it because there isn't sufficient evidence.
Of course, you're an atheist. You disagree.
I used to be a Christian, bro. I disagree because I see no evidence for it. I was brainwashed to believe that there was. And the thing is that there is nothing that says the supernatural is the best and only conclusion to how the universe began.
I mean, Stephen Meyer, he would actually say that, yeah, but he's a philosopher of science, and
well, I think it's worse than you. It's actually worse than you simply saying that there's a God behind it. You are actually making up attributes for the God. You are saying that the God is a mind similar to your mind doing these things. Like when you actually dream up or come to the conclusion that you can actually say things about the actual like makeup of the God, you're going even further than just saying it's a God.
Right. In fact,
you're going outside of the universe and then outside of the God and saying how the God works.
Right. And let me jump in here.
That's wild, man.
This is where I was trying to go with it. And I'm glad you said that, because what you have done with God is you have defined a being that does not follow the laws of logic within this universe.
Oh, of course, because he's infinite.
Okay. Why can you do that?
You've added another attribute.
And us not say that there could also be alternative laws that don't exist in this universe that could explain it just as well as God.
Samuel, you can't say God is infinite. How do you know that? Maybe he's just greater. God could be
infinite
parameters. And
all God has to be is bigger.
Elliot, hang on. You've taken one set of parameters that go outside the laws of logic in this universe, and you've said these are the only possible ones, and they are God. And I'm saying, how the hell did you draw that conclusion? It could be any other set of parameters, any other set of laws that exist beyond this universe. It could be anything. We just don't know.
Well, to answer Mr. Elliott, I do agree. I have to go back to my thinking. I'm sorry. I'm starting to get a little tired here, but okay. I would say that with infinity, I wouldn't say that's necessarily something that you could draw from infinity. Like you would have just something bigger, right? Just the bigger fish eating the bigger fish. That's a terrible analogy, but I do agree.
There could be a bigger God. I mean, there could always be something bigger. Like you can't say God is infinite just because you say he is. All he has to be is bigger than our universe. He could be, you know what? He could be a God inside of a universe factory, and this was his particular creation, this universe on his assembly line.
Sure, but then my question would be, where does that universe come from?
We don't know. How could we possibly know? We have no idea. All
Yeah,
we know
but
is that
if
all we know is that the universe is here. That's
but
all we know.
but that is an
Anything else
idea.
you're making up.
But my one thing that I would reason to is that that is an idea, and then you have to ask, where's that idea come from? And so philosophically, proper philosophy is that it's improper to have an infinite regress, especially of minds, for all ideas. It's ridiculous. Instead, you
But why do you
ultimately
why do
go back to
Christians-
one source.
I have this question that I've been dying to ask a Christian.
Okay.
And it's, why do you go back one regress and then stop? Like, why? Christians are just trying to get to God, but they never ask what might be beyond that. Like, it's like, oh, I win, I got here, it's God. That's where the regress is going to stop. They only go back a single regress. You're saying that if we don't stop, we'll go on forever with regresses, infinite regress. But there's a big difference between one regress and infinite regresses.
Yes.
Christians never ask what's beyond that. Like, what's beyond God? They always stop and they give up.
Occam's razor.
I am just as justified asking what is two regresses back.
Sure, but again, Occam's razor. It's the one that fits the bill. If you have an immaterial, spaceless, timeless, very
it's
powerful
the one that
being.
fits your worldview.
Of course, it fits my worldview, but I think it also fits. I think it also fits the bill, because you add complexity if you say add a multiverse. That adds complexity unnecessary in order for the universe to come into existence. That's not science.
God violates Occam's razor by adding complexity.
So hang on. So Samuel, let's just say, because I'm not going to say that you're wrong, that God does fit the bill. That is one possibility.
Sure.
But we don't know that that's true. It is just a possible option that fits the bill. But I can promise you we have others that also fit the bill. Why did you choose God?
Well, I don't know what else would be an immaterial, spaceless, timeless, very powerful being. So I would say that's a description of God. That's but why not call that God at that point? If it's spaceless, timeless, immaterial, very powerful, why be more complex? Why not just posit the simplest answer to the question, or I guess what you need?
Because this God suddenly comes in because he gives us a book and we have to live by the rules of this book.
He could, if he has causal powers and he's an agent outside of the system, I don't determine him. Okay, I don't do anything that he does. Like, I can ask him every single day. I question that all the time. Why in the world did God even create me in the first place, in the place that I am at? I can't tell you, because I'm finite. So
why do you start with that question, though? Why do Christians always begin with the question, why did God create this or create that or creation this? Why did he make me? Why even begin with the question, why did God? Why not begin with the question?
Because
we know.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. But I do believe that he exists. And so from there, the next question is, it's not my first question. It's probably my 10th, if not 20th. Okay. So I agree. You should ask the question, why does God? In fact, this is one of the things that I wish Christians would do more, is to critically think and question what they believe. I wish Christians did that with theology, because otherwise we'd have a lot fewer debates. Actually, that's not necessarily true. We probably have more, but that's also because people are fickle. But I think it's important to question what you believe. Now, again, I believe Christianity is true, so I think getting back to the skepticism of it all, I think it's important for everyone, no matter what you believe, whatever worldview it is, materialism, naturalism, humanism, the Judeo-Christian worldview, or Islam, Hinduism, literally you should seek in all areas if it's actually true. I realize you guys don't think that I have necessarily done that, but at least we can agree that that's a good thing to do, right? I'm trying to find that common ground here. I love your guys' questions. I'm not trying to close this, but I am at the same time. No, I feel terrible.
I would just, the one thing Samuel, that I would want you to take away from this.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think is a very, very important point, is when it comes to this idea of a mind behind the universe, my point is that is something that comes from that idea of a mind behind an immaterial mind behind the universe is something that comes from humans' imagination.
Sure.
We have come to that conclusion. We have dreamed that up.
Sure.
That is not something that manifests itself in reality in a way that we can know. That is something that we have tried really hard for a really long time to imagine where the universe came from, and we have dreamed up that there is a mind behind that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Because that no being has no one has come to us from outside the universe and told us that. That's a conclusion.
Yeah, but
we have dreamed. That's something that's come from our imagination.
Yeah, and I agree that it's something we've posited, but I think there's good reason. Like for instance, mathematics. I would say mathematics is the big reason that I would think that there is a mind, because math requires a mind to exist. That was Roger Penrose.
Math is a tool that we have developed.
That
wasn't given to us by a mind.
No, but it's discovered. Math and science have been discovered.
It's also been modified, endlessly modified.
Yeah, I would just say correctly.
Until it works. Like if an equation doesn't work, if a system doesn't work, it's discarded. And we've discarded it a lot in mathematics.
Sure. I would just say that it's still correct because it helps us to examine reality. So, and understand it. But but anyways,
we're tired, man. We got to end this. But
yeah.
But that was a lot of fun. Go ahead and finish. We want to give you the last word because you are our guest. What do you want to say to close this out?
Well, again, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. I know we didn't go even into all the spaces that we wanted to go in, because there's just so much we could talk about, Yes. But I would say that one of the things that I did actually want to say, that I even said in my video about skeptics, is that I appreciate the skeptics, not only in my life, but also the atheists that have come to me with questions that I haven't necessarily thought of, at least in the way that they've come to me with. And so I appreciate you guys. I want to thank you. And I hope that we can continue to understand each other more and more. Of course I want to see you guys in heaven and ultimately become Christians, but I'm certain you guys want me to become an atheist. And it'd be cool if one of us came to the other side, but I would say that either way, I still want to be your guys' friend. I love it. I love this stuff. So, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to end with. So,
I really appreciate what you're doing, Samuel. I've listened to some of your videos, and you're one of the very few, maybe the only Christian that I've seen actually try to go down this road voluntarily.
Thank you.
I appreciate your whatever it is you're attempting. I appreciate the hard work you're doing.
Thank you. And I want to do it with all genuinity. That's not the correct way to say that, but I want to do it as genuine as possible. I want to actually question and do my best. So.
Well, you are a really, really kind and friendly person. So we're okay being your friend.
That's the reason you be my friend? I'm just kidding.
No, you're dope.
Why not?
And we came at you pretty hard. So I'm impressed, actually. Very, very impressed. And thank you very much for being our guest, man. You really rock. And I hope that we can do this again because, like you said,
awesome.
we can talk forever.
Yeah.
And I feel like we just scratched the surface. So much left. So thank you very much for taking your precious time and dialoguing with us.
Maybe next time we'll put timers on it so none of us go too long. And like you get 2 minutes, you get 2 minutes, you get 2 minutes.
Yeah. I think we need to do that and a good chance to cross-examine where it's fair, where you would have a chance to actually ask each of us and you'd get more time because of that. So I think we would have a great time. So we should definitely maybe do that, but more structured. I'd really appreciate that. It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just got two quick things before I go and before you close. Maybe I should do this after the recording. So
we'll talk after the recording if it's something.
Okay. Yeah. Let's wait.
Yeah. All right. We'll do that right after the show. So stick around for the ending. It'll have like a 30-second thing and then we'll talk. All right. So anybody just real quick, please join us at Deconversion Nation on Facebook. We'd love to have you guys do that. Anybody watching, just look for us there. The link will also be below in the info. It's a great chance for Christians to come to a place that's safe where you can ask questions and it's a private group, and you have a chance to interact with atheists and have some of your questions answered if you have any. There's no obligation to be an atheist to join the group. We just welcome anybody and have dialogue. So we'd love to have you over there. Samuel, you're welcome there as well. Anybody who wants to come over is a great environment to do that. It's not an environment for Christians to come in and try to persuade us. That's not the goal. It's for Christians who have genuine questions that would like to ask. Come on in, and we will give you answers to your questions, and it's a great chance to dialogue. So that's open and available to everybody. This Sunday night, I am having a one-on-one formal debate with Stephen Whitsett on the existence of God. So I encourage you guys to check that out. The info will be in the link below. That is going to be at 21st Century Mind. Tristan Gabriel will be hosting that as a moderator. And so that's going to be a really fun debate. Does God exist? I'm taking the negative, obviously, and Stephen is taking the affirmative. So please join us. That'll be a real good time. I know it's during the Super Bowl, but I mean, who cares about the Super Bowl, right?
Some people.
I mean, you know what I figured? If you're watching the Super Bowl, this is a great chance to test that screen thing. Watch the Super Bowl and then have us on audio, because what a great commentation that would be right over the Super Bowl. My voice, gosh, can't beat that. So anyway, so that's all that. I think that's it. I can't think of anything else. Elliot, am I missing anything important?
Nope. I think we've run out the clock.
All right. You will also see Samuel's link at the bottom as well in the info. Please go check out his channel. Give him some support as well, because he's a great guy and deserves our support as well. All right. As you know, every Christian has their own version of Christianity. We're here to unravel your conversion. See you next time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Samuel David Spoonhour. I'm very honored to have you today. I am kind of welcoming you to the Samuel Spoonhour channel. This is really just me giving out philosophy. I'm not a professional at all. I've just learned some things from other Christians, atheists, and just different philosophers, and also especially reading my Bible. That's taught me a lot. But this is not directly associated with the Gospel Call or with First Baptist Church. It is technically collaborative, so it is connected in a way. But if I say anything that is different theologically or philosophically than, say, my dad when he is preaching, or my brother when he is preaching, or any of our guest preachers, or anything that I say or anyone else says on the Gospel Call, it's of no effect. This is more or less independent in terms of ideology, philosophy, and theology. The whole point of this is really to give people something to think about. I am just doing this kind of uncut. If you find these videos entertaining, I am very, very grateful. That's kind of the purpose of this. I'm just going to give you some thoughts that I had on my mind. Hopefully it'll be just about a half an hour each video. And you guys leave some comments down below. If you agree or disagree, I promise you will probably disagree 90% of the time. But I can't promise you I'll actually get to all of those agreements or disagreements. So have some patience with me. I'm just trying to get some videos out consistently. This is supposed to be like a weekly post. I hope that you all enjoy.